This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us here today. My name is Annette Gutierrez and I'm the Executive Director of the Rio Grande Council of Governments. Our Council of Governments service area covers El Paso, Hudspeth, Culberson, Jeff Davis, Presidio, and Brewster County. That's the service area that's been laid out for us by the governor's office. And so we're one of 24 councils of governments throughout the state of Texas. In 1987, we had the great benefit of having Las Cruces and Doña County participate as members of our organization as well. So we're only one of two council of governments who has a multi-state function. And so thank you for those that are joining us in New Mexico for this workshop as well. So what we wanted to do today was just give everyone on the federal level an opportunity to say hello to everyone, to let you know who your representatives are, and to give you a bit more some information on the infrastructure bill. I know there's still a lot of items that are in flux, but I think if we're going to hear from anyone, might as well hear it from the federal side in terms of how it is that we're going to maneuver through this process with this great historic funding that's been made available to all of our communities. And so with that in mind, Benjamin, if it's okay, I'm going to turn over the presentation duties to you. And let me just pull you up real quick. Here we go. Okay, so I have now, hopefully Benjamin will get control of the screen, and then we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Benjamin first. And so Ben is with Congressman Escobar's office. He's a senior legislative aide. I know he does so much more than that. And so if we had time, we would definitely go into it, but I'll let you all be able to hear from Ben right now. What he's going to do is he's going to give a broad overview of the infrastructure bill, and hopefully that'll kind of give us a roadmap on where we should start with this process. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I sure can.
Great. Well, thank you for that introduction. And am I good to go? Okay, great. Well, thank you all. Thanks for having me on. As mentioned, my name's Ben Harrison. I work for Congressman Veronica Escobar in her DC office as a senior legislative assistant. For the relevance of this conversation, I cover transportation and infrastructure for her, but I cover, as was alluded to, I cover a pretty wide portfolio. And then also with me on this call is, she should be on this call, I see her, is Lizette Ruiz, who is in our district office, who's our district contact. And if there's a chat function, she'll share her email. But she's going to be our, if you're in El Paso County, she's going to be our main, if you're a member of the El Paso County government, she's going to be our contact for all the grants, well, any grant really, but all the grants that are going to be coming down from the infrastructure bill here. So today I just wanted to give a very brief, very quick presentation on, the contents of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and kind of tell you all why it's a little bit unique, especially, and this is a very similar presentation to what I've been giving to a lot of our local constituents, our local units of government. And, I think a lot of what I've tell them is going to be relevant to you all as well. So we'll just go ahead and get started. Okay, so again, this is a quick summary slide. Bipartisan infrastructure law signed into law by President Biden on November 15th. Our office, along with Senators Lujan and Heinrich, we're very proud to be the members in the region who voted to advance this bill, make it law. Overall, it's a $1.2 trillion spending bill with over $550 billion of that being in new spending. And that the life of the bill is over 5 years. So a lot of these programs, a lot of these investments are going to be happening over a 5-year span. The IIJ, the other name for the bipartisan infrastructure law is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It's a little bit confusing, but of the new spending, of the new $550 billion in spending, about 52% of that is allocated towards modernizing and making improvements to all modes of transportation. So wanted to point that out to y'all. And I would say, as you kind of embark on this, on trying to figure out what programs work best for your region, what may work best for your localities, would definitely turn to the administration's tool, build.gov. It's a great place to see all the available grant programs, what is coming up, or maybe there's a deadline coming up soon for certain programs, but it gives you a great summary of all the different programs that are available through the infrastructure bill. I will say that at the moment, there's certainly a lot of funding available because of the passage of this bill, but because a lot of that funding is also dependent on the appropriations process. The government has to allocate money every fiscal year for spending. There are certain programs that are a little bit delayed, but hopefully, coming up in March, there'll be an agreement and implementation of the bill will be sped up. But as we come up on that process, again, highly encourage you to reach out to go to build.gov, look at all those different grant programs on there, because they'll definitely be an invaluable resource. And then also turn to your member of Congress, your member of Congress's office. For our office, the way we've set it up is essentially my partner in the district office, and she is going to be trying to answer as many questions as possible. And if she doesn't know the answer, she'll bounce it up to me. And if I don't know the answer, I'll bounce it to the relevant agency. So that's kind of how our office is set it up, but different for every office. So we definitely encourage you to reach out to your member of Congress and see what they maybe have set up for their infrastructure process. Just real quickly, top lines of what is actually what different pots of money are becoming available in the bill, or how much is allocated toward each process. $110 billion for. I'm sorry, and this is of the new spending. So this is not including the other part of this, which was a reauthorization. It was $110 billion in roads, bridges, and other major projects, $55 billion in water infrastructure, $65 billion in broadband, $25 billion in airports, and the list goes on. I'll let you all kind of read this as you go. And I'll say, we're already starting to see really great positive effects from this bill, especially in El Paso. Just last week, the congressman announced north of $600 million for the Bridge of the Americas, just a complete modernization and overhaul of that port of entry. So that's just an example of how that money is already coming down, or how it's being announced. Obviously, there's going to be a process after the announcement, and you have to figure out how exactly the money is going to be spent. But that money is already coming down, making its way down to localities. So certainly already seeing some great benefits to it. So on this slide, what I've been sharing with our localities is, the overall total of the bill is $1 trillion in spending, $550 billion in new spending. But the unique thing about this bill is that there are a lot of great opportunities for localities to apply directly for federal grant programs. And what do I mean by that? Usually with reauthorization bills for infrastructure, especially, a lot of that money comes down through state formula programs. And speaking for El Paso County, our state government typically does not look favorably upon investing in our community. We feel that a lot of that money goes towards Austin, Dallas, Houston, and in our opinion, it's not that we want those localities to be getting less money. We just want to be getting the appropriate amount of money. Parity as well is what we're trying to get. And we feel that the infrastructure bill establishes a lot of new discretionary programs that localities can compete for directly. You don't have to rely on the state government to be handing down this funding towards y'all. Now, you will still be getting those formula program funding, like for broadband, for road, bridges, and other items like this. But this gives you an additional opportunity to add on to that whatever funding you may be getting from those state programs. So there are a lot of different programs in this. And again, I'm not going to be able to cover everything because this bill is massive. And that's why there's resources like bill.gov. And again, folks can come to us with questions and we can ask them to the agencies. But on this next slide, just want to give you just three different examples of discretionary grant programs. So these are programs that you'll be able to apply directly to an agency for. So one is the top program is broadband. You'll be able to, especially in our rural areas in El Paso County, most likely in the eastern part of our county, we'll be able to expand and develop more broadband infrastructure through this bill. And that is a grant program that you'll be able to apply directly through a federal agency for. Low to no emission bus program. Again, El Paso, we have Sun Metro, which is a great transportation system, but it'd be great if we also had the funding to transition it to a cleaner fuel, and also great to have funding to have new buses in general. So this is a great mixture of trying to combat the climate crisis, but also bringing more funding down for our transportation authorities. So again, that's a program that you can apply directly for as well. And then the bottom program is I feel it's important to highlight this one because we're all border counties and we all have colonias. While there's no direct funding mechanism within the bipartisan infrastructure law for colonias, there are a lot of different opportunities to make those programs fit colonia needs. So this program in particular, and then the other reason why I highlighted is because this is a program where localities are not the only folks who are able to apply for the program. This one, a nonprofit organization can also apply. So this one, they can apply for funds to construct, repair, replace decentralized wastewater systems for low to moderate income households. I think I kind of got cut off there. I apologize. But again, great example of how the border region has specific needs, specifically for colonias, and trying to find opportunities within the bill to fit those needs and being able to apply directly for those programs. So again, these are just three programs that I picked from the bill. There are many other programs, and again, highly encourage you to go to bill.gov because that will give you a fully constructed list of what to look for. And again, use your member of Congress to kind of help you navigate the way. I know for our office, we're not only going to be helping navigate the way, but we're going to also be trying to provide support for programs as for projects as we can. So those are just some ways that we can help, that at least our office can help our constituents out, and maybe for you all to go to your member of Congress for. I think that's the last PowerPoint slide for me. I didn't want to I wanted to be quick and to the point of just a broad overview of the bill. Happy to take any questions on my end on any of that. I think just real quick before I hand it off, because I do get this question a lot of who can apply for a lot of these programs, and it depends on the program, but 9 times out of 10, it's a unit of local government can apply for these programs. So if you're a county, if you're a smaller locality, a local town, you can certainly apply for a lot of these programs. But that is where you'll have to kind of go to bill.gov, see who the eligible recipients are, and kind of go from there to see, if you're able to apply, or maybe there's a nonprofit organization in your county that can apply for this program and address the need. So there's counties, cities, local towns, nonprofits can apply for these. Just depends on the program. But I think that's it on my end, Annette, and happy to hand it off or take questions.
Yes, well, thank you, Benjamin. I think maybe I'll start. We have a few minutes for you, so we'll give an opportunity for questions. But for me, with the last example that you gave on those 3 discretionary programs, would you be able to tell us which agencies are going to be administering those grants? And then are those grants, are they stuck in appropriations as well? Or are those something that are going to be able for communities to start applying for now?
So that's a great question. So are you talking about just those 3 specific programs, or just
Yeah.
you know,
Uh-huh.
programs overall?
Yes.
So these 3 specific ones. So I believe the low to no emission bus program, I think that is coming up. I think that is going to be announced here soon. But I'm happy to go back and check to see if these are available. I don't believe these specific ones are available for application right now. But I would say that you know, the low to no emission bus program is going to be through I believe it's going to be through the Federal Transit Administration, and then the grants for decentralized wastewater systems is most likely going to be through the Environmental Protection Agency, and then the distance learning at the broadband program is going to be through, and I apologize for forgetting. I forget what the acronym stands for, but I believe it's the NTIA. Yeah, but I think that's where it's going to be through. And I'll kind of that time good segue to, you know, how these programs are going to be announced. We've kind of seen, as after the bill was passed into law, a steady cadence of programs being announced, you know, funding opportunities being announced. So I think pretty much like almost every week or every other week, a new program is being announced by the administration and opened up for funding. I would say, again, even though the bill was passed into law, it's not as if all the funding is open up immediately. You got to wait for the appropriations process, and then you also have to wait for the agencies to actually, you know, implement it and make sure they have an appropriate process to take in those applications. But these are certainly things that are coming out every week, and we'll keep an eye on bill.gov. And I know, you know, we're trying to keep an eye out as well.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it, Benjamin. We have time for maybe one more question. If anybody wants to unmute themselves and ask a question to Ben, if you have one. Okay, well then we'll go ahead. Thank you, Benjamin. Really appreciate it. I know you're pulled many directions, especially during this time of the year. So we appreciate you taking the time to be with us and to talk about this important bill. So thank you again. What we'll do now is we're going to move into the bill.gov website that Benjamin has been referencing. And Melanie, if I see her here, let's see. There you are, Melanie. Would you like me to make you the presenter?
Yes, please. That would be great. Thanks, Annette.
Here we go. So Melanie is a field representative from Senator Ben's office. Sorry about that, Melanie. So, you know, the Council of Governments, like I said, Doña Ana and Las Cruces are member governments of ours, but I know that this is just the best time for us to be able to partner with each other. And so I really appreciate Melanie making herself available for this effort. And so I'm hoping that this is one of many programs that we can offer throughout the year. So Melanie, I'll turn it over to you if that's all right.
That's great. Thank you. And thanks, everyone. Good to meet you. I'm here in southern New Mexico, just happy to be a sister city to El Paso and our friends in Texas. Just a quick introduction. I represent Senator Ben Ray Lujan. He's the junior senator from New Mexico. And before we dive into what will be pretty much just 5 minutes, I think, on the tool that Benjamin talked about, I wanted to tell you just a little bit about, you know, the senator. He represented northern New Mexico in the House for many years and grew up in Nambe, which is a small farming community north of Santa Fe, which borders Nambe and Pojoaque Pueblos. He's on 5 committees. He's Ag, Indian Affairs, Health, Education, Labor, Pensions, Budget, Commerce, and he chairs the Technology, Media, and Broadband Committee, which is real important for not just New Mexico, but for the nation, given the significant amount of federal resources that have been and will continue to be dedicated, including through this bill on broadband. I will go ahead and let me just close this one window and start sharing my screen. Hold on a second. And then we will. Okay, can you all see my screen now? Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can, Melanie.
Okay. Let me close out this chat. Are you seeing also the GoToMeeting stuff or just the screen? Just the building America better.
Yes, we can see the screen.
Okay, perfect. Okay, before we dive into the Excel spreadsheet, I wanted to just reference this document. And so if you want some reading, this would be a good one to start with because it's very comprehensive and I believe it will be continued to get updated. It's found, I'll put this in the chat as well, but I would and I also put my contact information already. So hopefully you get that. But I wanted to just have you see this because there's a way to also search this document. And let me see if you could just do a find. Sorry, I'm got like this GoToMeeting thing distracting me. Let me move it out of the way. Anyway, you can search this. I can't seem to do it interactively with you all, but you can do like, the Control F and then type in broadband. It'll take you just to that section. You can peruse it. There's quite a bit of good information specific to the grant programs that Ben has talked to. So for example, you'll get also not just information on the specific funding allocated. Let's just, for example, I just scrolled down. You'll see a short description. What you'll also see are helpful hyperlinks. And then this blue box right here, I think, is also very important because as Ben mentioned, some of these programs, much of this funding is going to be going through, formula funding and funding to states through existing programs. But there are also new programs, discretionary and grant and competitive grant programs that are being created. And these little boxes will tell you kind of like, okay, how you're going to get, how to get ready, timing, when some of the rules are for standing up these new programs will be announced, or when they will be sharing kind of updates. So I would strongly recommend you take a look at this document to get a sense of the flavor of all the variety of things that it includes, okay? And so what I wanted to then share with you is this. So if you go to bill.gov, there's going to be a link to an Excel spreadsheet. It's called the guidebook, and it is something you can download onto your computer and search. And there's ways you can manipulate it to serve maybe just a topic that you're interested in. So for example, let's say you're interested in broadband, you could toggle, you could just even search, you could sort, you could find, you could maybe do this. And it'll, direct you, but you could also just toggle and this is what I wanted to show you. You could, if you see under category, for example, my cursor, there's a little arrow that allows you to, right now it's selecting all of them, but what if I don't want to see all of this? I just want to see broadband. You click on select all, it takes the arrow off all of those, and then you can just select broadband, or maybe you're an electric cooperative and you want broadband and, you know, there's one, maybe electric vehicles. It will give you just those two, okay? And then let's say we talked a little bit about the distance learning and telemedicine. So that's actually a grant program through the USDA Rural Development. So that's how much money there is, what form the funding will come as, like it's loan and grant, things like that. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of those things. You can also search by and sort by alphabetical order. Okay, so thank you so much. I think that's it. I think the best way to learn this is by just practicing. I will leave it at that and I'll stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. So with this bill.gov, I would assume that it's going to be updated continuously as some of this funding is getting to the appropriation stage, and so it's a fluid document. Is that correct in making that assumption?
Yes, it is it will well, I don't know for sure, but that's my guess. That's my best guess. Ben and some of the other staff might have another opinion on that, but I would assume that this is a kind of evolving, and different federal agencies are ramping up as we speak. The other important thing I wanted to share for those of you who are from New Mexico, and I guess this is applicable even for Texas. So the White House, so the administration has stood up their own team, interagency team for infrastructure, but has also suggested that states identify and stand up their own implementation teams. So for Texas, I'm not sure what the status of that is, but it's possible that the governor has moved forward to identify individuals through the governor's office or through other state agencies that are going to be leading and advising and working to provide support to local governments. In New Mexico, we do have an implementation team that has been stood up. We have an advisor for broadband and also for infrastructure. I'm going to put some of that information in the chat for those of you from New Mexico. In addition, in New Mexico, we have a delegation office coordinator. So she works for the entire delegation, and she does grant searches and also letters of support. So those of you from New Mexico that are interested and will be pursuing grant opportunities, you can always reach out to us or to Lisa. I'll put her contact information in the chat as well, and you can follow up that way.
Thank you so much, Melanie. I'll definitely do some research to see who I can find out who is part of the implementation team for Texas. And then I think that Excel sheet seems like that's going to be the clip notes to the 436-page document. So I think that's going to be really important for our communities in terms of determining which funding source they want to apply for. And I can definitely see where we can start using that document to kind of prioritize and see which are going to be some of the programs that are a bit more low-hanging fruit for our communities. I think that in both of our communities, Texas and New Mexico side, we do have those MSAs, the large communities, but then outside of those, we do have communities that are very rural. And so I think that perhaps if we can figure out a way how to maximize on that opportunity specifically for our rural communities, where there can also perhaps be some partnerships where I could see where El Paso Water might be able to partner with with our Lower Valley Water District, perhaps, maybe just so I can kind of meet each other with their water systems. And so that might be an example of what we can see. But definitely, I appreciate you providing us with that bill.gov. I think everybody should have that memorized and put that on their favorites. Does anyone have any questions for Melanie at this point? Okay, all right. Well, Marcy, did you want to ask a question?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, excellent. Yay, it worked today. I just wanted to know, Ms. Goodman, if on the website, is there an opportunity for us to receive, to sort of sign up for a newsletter or sign up for updates, how a lot of them have that. I could put it on my list to check weekly, but I could also just get a notification if, for their updates. Is that an option?
I'm sure that is an option. Let me do some quick research while you continue to do this workshop and see if I can post some of that information. Somebody signed me up, so I'm sure there's a way to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy. Okay, well then, let's go ahead and move into our next presenter. I see that she's ready to go. We're now going to hear from Amy Hernandez, and she is the Regional District Director for Congressman Tony Gonzalez. And so she covers, one of her service area covers all of our 6 counties in far west Texas, parts of El Paso, but also goes into Hudson, Culberson, Jeff Davis, Brewster, and Presidio. And so Amy's going to give you her take on this infrastructure bill and how it is that her office can assist those communities that are east of El Paso. So Amy, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me this morning. So I'm just going to get right into it. So, like Ben said, so while congressional offices, we have some ideas as to where the money will be allocated once they leave those federal agencies. Most likely, they're going to be given via grants, and it will probably also be the federal government dividing up the money to state agencies, and then the state agencies allocating those funds directly. We don't know yet how these funds will be allocated or divided up to then be available to your communities. The monies are there, the money's there, but we just don't have those exact answers yet. So just keep that in mind. We will keep you guys in the loop once we hear some more good stuff. And then that being said, each of my counties from El Paso, Hudspeth, Culberson, Jeff Davis, Presidio. I don't have Brewster, my counterpart Jalen has Brewster. So hi to everyone in Brewster. All of you guys are just so special and so awesome in your own ways. But each of you guys need different things, right? So ultimately, rural communities will have the same struggles, whether it's water and sewer infrastructure, economic development, or needing more tourism, roads, developing or expanding your ports of entry, specifically in El Paso, Hudspeth, and Presidio, and broadband. Excuse me. So I didn't have a presentation for you guys. So everything that I share with you guys, I'm happy to email you guys because there's just so much stuff and we have so little time. So these are our office's recommendations for you guys, just to have on your radar and for you guys to have So one of them is going to be the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program that was specifically given $72 billion. And this specific program is because a part of it enhances travel and tourism, right? And so you'll see that in places like Hudspeth and places like kind of the lower valley of El Paso, Presidio, right? Marfa, Fort Davis. The other one is the National Highway Freight Program, right? It was awarded $7.15 billion. And it essentially just increases the maximum number of highway miles a state may designate as a critical rural freight corridor, right? So I think of Highway 90 for this one. Another one would be promoting resilient operations for transformative, efficient, and cost-saving transportation, or otherwise known as PROTECT grant program. This was given $7.3 billion in formula and $1.4 billion in competitive grants. This one specifically, so this grant, it's essentially, it provides funding for planning and resilience improvement funding for communities to help assess vulnerabilities, right? So anytime there's some sort of crisis, right, for the winter storm or for flooding, right? We had a couple of constituents pass away due to flooding last year or due to the winter storm, right? So stuff like that it would address. The Healthy Streets program, that one was awarded $500 million. And whether I'm in the Lower Valley or in Hudspeth or Van Horn or in Presidio or Jeff Davis, what I've heard is we would like some nice sidewalks, right? Kind of promote walking, etc. So that is a good grant. And then we have the National Infrastructure Project Assistance, which was $10 billion. And then this one establishes monies for regional economic mobility and safety. So anything that has to do with rail projects, actually, and my mind went to Presidio. They have an awesome new train there, and safety's kind of been a concern for the community. So also there's a lot of water infrastructure stuff, but like I said, I'm gonna keep that short, and I'm gonna put that on a nice email for you guys. So, okay, so then of course I have the privilege of seeing you guys all of the time if you guys fall under my counties. So you already know if there's ever a question or a concern that you guys have regarding this infrastructure bill as a whole, just because there is so much of it, you guys can always call me or text me at any time. I'll make sure to put my information on there. We will continue to play it by ear, and once we get a clearer picture on exactly how these monies will be allocated and when they're going to become available, I'm happy to regroup with each of the counties and municipalities, and go through which grants would better fit that individual county or city, and then provide that letter of support for you guys, and of course be a liaison between the district and these federal agencies. But that's about it on my end.
Thank you, Amy. I think there probably are going to be some questions from our communities. I know that Marcy just put in the chat. Can you tell us again, who is your counterpart for Brewster County?
My counterpart is Jalen Falcon. He is based out of the Fort Stockton district office. He goes to Alpine about twice or three times a month.
Okay, and I do have Jalen's information, Marcy, so I'll forward that on to the Brewster County folks. So you all have that if you don't have it now. And are there any questions for Amy that anyone may have? If you do have a question, go ahead and feel free to unmute yourself. Okay. All right. Well, I think probably what's happening right now, Amy and everyone else who's presenting, it's a bit overwhelming. Where do you start? So I'm sure that as we start to get a better understanding of the funding and what's going to be most appropriate, the questions will start. So hopefully this will be, again, the first of several sessions. So I'll go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and thank you again, Amy, appreciate it. I'm going to make Sierra the presenter. And I'm going to ask Peggy O'Brien, who's our local government manager, to present Sierra to the group. They've done a lot of great work recently, and so I definitely would like for Peggy to have an opportunity to discuss that. So Peggy.
Thanks everyone for being here, and Sierra, thank you so much for presenting. We've been working with Connected Nation Texas in the Tri-County, Brewster, Jeff Davis, and Presidio, and they helped us, the train's coming right through as I'm speaking, on a technology action plan. Here it comes. Okay.
Peggy, can you hold on one moment? I accidentally muted you. So can you start that again?
There we go. So I've been working with the Tri-County. We formed a Tri-County Broadband Action Coalition, and that was for Jeff Davis, Brewster, and Presidio counties. And Connected Nation Texas helped us create a technology action plan, and we did a survey through the Tri-County to determine who had access, who didn't, affordability, reasons for inaccessibility, a whole plethora, which I think she will possibly summarize. And moving forward, we did Big Bend Telecom did an application with the first NTIA NOFO, and we're still awaiting the award notifications on that. But there are, as Benjamin Harrison said at the top of this meeting, there will be more monies coming. So this is good news with respect to connectivity. So Sierra.
All right. Can y'all see my screen? Wonderful. Okay, well, my name is Sierra Seas. I'm a Broadband Solutions Manager at Connected Nation Texas. Peggy, thank you so much for the introduction. I really appreciate it. I have to say, it's before I worked at Connected Nation Texas, I actually worked for Congress. So it's kind of great to be back around some federal employees because that's where I got my start. So I feel like if I were to like bust out, privacy release forms and some of my old language, people would know what I was talking about because nobody at Connected Nation knows what I'm talking about when I say that. But absolutely, I'm really excited to be here to talk about the infrastructure bill and what it means for broadband, because really and truly, I think, as we've said beforehand, this is really kind of once in a generation funding, once in a lifetime funding that we're seeing coming down the pipeline for broadband and a lot of other infrastructure. So I want to set the stage just briefly a little bit for little people who are not familiar with us at Connected Nation Texas. We are the statewide program of Connected Nation, which is headquartered in Kentucky. Connected Nation celebrated 20 years of service last year. Our mission at Connected Nation is to improve lives by providing innovative solutions that expand the access, adoption, and use of high-speed internet. And so when we talk about broadband and the infrastructure bill, this is all that we do. We're really passionate about it, kind of on a global scale. So a big thing that I want to do before we really dive into the logistics of the infrastructure bill and broadband is actually define what broadband is, just very briefly, because I get this question probably most often in my job is, well, what exactly is broadband, and why is the infrastructure bill dealing with broadband? And so I think very, very simply, broadband is high-speed internet. Technically speaking, broadband is any kind of connection other than dial-up. According to the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, broadband is a 25 by 3 megabit per second connection. So that's a 25 megabit per second download and 3 megabit per second upload. That 25 by 3 connection is going to be that image in the middle that you see of those 3 different dials. You'll see that supports about 3 to 5 devices at any given time. And what we're seeing in 2022 really is that our society needs faster speeds. We have multi-person households with diverse connectivity needs. Take, for example, a home where one parent is teleworking, one child is doing virtual school, one parent is doing a telehealth visit, and the other child is watching Netflix or Disney Plus, whatever it is. Each of those activities requires an internet connection, and none of those individuals can really afford for the Zoom meeting to buffer. Whether it's the school lecture, the Zoom meeting, or even your healthcare appointment, you need that standard and that sturdy connection. And so it's important for the bandwidth available to match the changing needs of our society. And so what we're really seeing in the infrastructure bill is a requirement of 100 by 20 minimum speed for new build outs. In the sense that the faster speeds provide greater bandwidth and greater opportunities for families to use the internet and connect online. So with that kind of working knowledge, let's dive into it a little bit. I put this up here. I refer to it as the infrastructure bill. Some people refer to it by its full name, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Some people refer to it by the acronym of IIJA. Know that no matter how it's being referred to, folks are referring to the same idea. It's the same topic. So I'm going to refer to it as the infrastructure bill, just for working purposes. So somebody else already kind of talked about this, so I won't necessarily have to repeat it, which is really wonderful, but really and truly, this is historic and landmark legislation for many reasons. But for broadband, it's truly bringing once-in-a-generation funding. So the infrastructure bill contains $65 billion. Some people say billion with a B. I say billion for broadband, B for broadband. And there are 4 key elements. So the first and the biggest pot of money is nearly $43 billion, which is going to go directly to states. This funding will be used for infrastructure and connecting parts of the state that at a base level lack connectivity. So each state will receive $100 million, and then bigger states will receive more than that. The second piece of funding that we see is middle mile funding, about $1 billion for middle mile. So that's another infrastructure piece that we see there. The third part that we see is about $14.2 billion to make the emergency broadband program, the emergency broadband benefit program, I should say, permanent, but under the new name, the Affordable Connectivity Program. I'm sure Peggy is probably very familiar with this, because if you're connected and you're plugged into us at Connected Nation Texas, we're always sending out information about the Affordable Connectivity Program, because we think this is a phenomenal program as a means to bridge the digital divide, and especially that affordability gap. And then finally, that final piece that we see is nearly $3 billion for the Digital Equity Act. This was a standalone piece of legislation that was actually incorporated into the infrastructure bill. So that big chunk of money, that $40 billion pot of money, that's what's known as the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. More commonly, you're going to hear it referred to as the BEAD program. That's how I'm going to refer to it. But again, know that some people refer to it in that big long name, but primarily it's going to just be referred to as BEAD funding. So who actually is eligible for BEAD grants? Well, the short answer is U.S. states and territories. I've listed out a few things of what BEAD grants can be used for. Some examples include data collection, broadband mapping, broadband planning, broadband adoption. That last bullet point there on the screen says additional uses determined necessary by the NTIA. I think that leaves the door open a little bit for a little bit of creativity and nuances depending upon the unique needs of some of the individual states across the country. And so I think we'll see a little bit of, maybe difference in Nebraska, Michigan, Texas, depending upon what they're actually, looking for. Of course, the needs in Texas are very unique. We're 254 counties strong in Deep East Texas, and the Panhandle and the country all have very unique needs when it comes to broadband. And so I think we'll see some unique of the funding. But the big question that I know is on everybody's mind is, well, when is this funding actually going to show up here in Texas? And the short answer is that states are not going to receive this funding until we have new maps from the FCC. A little bit of background, the FCC process of updating current broadband maps with more detailed and precise information on the availability of fixed and mobile broadband services. So we are waiting on these maps to go live, be published, kind of whatever catchphrase you want to use, before funding can be allocated to each state. So we know each state gets a minimum of 100 million, but the additional allocations are dependent on the data from these new maps, which we don't have yet. This map updating process has hit a few roadblocks, if you will. For the sake of brevity, I will leave it on the slide, and I'm happy to provide these slides to anybody who wants to see them and go into more of the detail. But the roundabout way of concluding this topic is that BEAD funding will be allocated when the new federal maps are published, but that definitive timeline on the publications of the maps is not totally known. I've seen some articles, reports say that it could be this summer, some say this fall, but I'm also a big proponent of when we're dealing with this large amount of money, this large amount of money, that I believe it when I see it, because I don't want to spend too much money before I actually have it in my pocket. So for broadband providers who take BEAD funding, there will be certain requirements that they are required to meet. The two biggest thing is that they will need to be providing certain levels of speed. As we talked about earlier, the biggest need is going to be providing a higher level of speed, that 100 by 20 versus the standard 25 by 3. And I think that's just really indicative of the highly digitized, uber-connected, very technologically involved nature of our society at this point. And then the other part that we see is the need for low-cost plans. Providers will have to offer a low-cost service option for subscribers who qualify. Again, a really great option for to bridge that affordability gap and bring internet access to everyone. So when we look at the statute of everything, the NTIA is required to inform each state of the minimum amount of financial support by spring. As of right now, the minimum amount we know is about 100 million. So until we have those FCC maps, we don't really know if we'll have additional information. But again, we could very well have that information come May. Again, we just have to wait to see when those maps actually come down the pipeline, which we know the FCC is doing really great work to get those maps up to date. We just have to wait to actually see when those come down the pipeline. So that's going to be the infrastructure piece. The final part, or I should say the next part that I want to talk about is this affordability piece. And when we talk about affordability in the broadband conversation, a big part of this is some folks might actually have access to broadband, but actually bringing it into their homes and subscribing to it is a totally different question. And so in order to fully grasp and have a holistic conversation about bridging the digital divide, we have to have an honest to goodness conversation about what it means to bridge that affordability gap. You know, and I think the COVID-19 pandemic has really driven this point home when we sent students home from the classrooms and we said, okay, we've got to start, you know, isolating and you can't be in the classroom. And students weren't able to keep up in the classroom. They weren't able to keep up with their education because maybe they didn't have a device in their home or they didn't have internet in their home. And so that's really what the Affordable Connectivity Program is really getting to the heart to. Congress, I think, really saw the importance and saw how wonderful the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program did and what it was able to succeed in. And so we at Connected Nation Texas are very excited about this program because I think it does really phenomenal work. So you may have heard of the Emergency Broadband Benefit. It is now the Affordable Connectivity Program. So it's instead of EBB, it's the ACP. And so it's helped to connect a lot of families during the pandemic to bring them a home internet connection. The biggest difference between the two programs is that the subsidy went from $50 a month to $30 a month. If you qualified for the emergency broadband benefit due to, I believe it's a loss of or a substantial loss in income, you will need to re-enroll in order to continue receiving that amount. Otherwise, pretty much everybody who was on the EBB will automatically be requalified. But it's a really phenomenal program. Actually, in fact, I believe that we expanded access as compared to the EBB, which is really phenomenal. I think, again, a phenomenal, you know, a great example of how Congress really took this to heart. So the final part of the infrastructure bill here that we want to talk about is digital equity. I'm not going to talk super in detail about it, and you will probably see here why very quickly. It's because if states are interested in this, they will be able to apply for funding from the NTIA to develop a state digital equity plan. What will happen is each governor will decide on an administering entity to serve as the recipient and administrator of the grant. This entity would then develop, implement, and oversee the state digital equity plan. So these are not funds per se that would trickle all the way down to individual communities. It would be more of a state level decision to pursue these digital equity grants, to pursue putting that plan together. And if they do, then there are state capacity grants and digital equity competitive grants that can then subsequently be applied for if the state originally pursues those digital equity grants. So it's kind of like a tiered process. If the state pursues level 1, then you can go to level 2 and level 3. But that's a bit further down the line, depending upon if states choose to pursue those in the first place. So that is the infrastructure when we talk about it in terms of affordability, infrastructure, and digital equity. I think I put my contact information in the chat, but if anybody has any other questions, I think I saw a few pinging while I was going through this, but I'm happy to answer any questions, and you can also take down my email and contact me at a later date if I can answer any questions then.
Sierra, this is Brad Newton in Presidio.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so my observation of a remote place like Presidio, and I'm not sure if you know where Presidio is, but we're down here in the, we can see Mexico from the porch of the city hall, okay? And we have, you know, pretty adequate internet when it's working, but what we don't have is any redundancy. So let's say they have a fiber cut near Abilene, boom, we're out for hours and hours. I mean, you know, basically City Hall has to shut down, our EMS doesn't work, and all that. So I was just wanting to kind of plant the seed with you that for rural areas, we need to make sure that we're not putting all of our eggs in one basket, and we will be able to, if one system goes out, kind of like the phone company, they just swap you over to a different line, or the electric company. So anyway, with that being said, thank you for all your work.
Absolutely, and I'm sure I'm going to bet that redundancy is probably a big issue when it comes to your 911 operations, that when those go down, you probably have a big issue with those telecommunications in terms of EMS services, you know, and sorts like that. That's the big story that we hear all across, you know, Texas, of when that line's cut, how are we supposed to get a hold of the volunteer fire department? How is the ambulance supposed to get out? Because, you know, when the line's cut, then what?
You sound like you are aware. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it. I'm like I said, I know there are a few chats and I can try to go through them and answer them, but is there anything else that I can answer on the topic right now?
Yeah, so Sarah, with regard to the BEAD funding, did you say that's going to be a pass through to state agencies, or is that going to be a direct application from the communities to the federal?
So the BEAD funding will go directly to the state. I'm assuming it will probably go to the Broadband Development Office that Texas now has set up, the BDO. From there, I am sure that there will be individual grant programs that Presidio County or would be able to apply for. From there, once it's actually kind of being fanned out from the individual state entity, but originally it's going to go to the states themselves.
Okay, and then are they, is this one of the funding sources that's being held up right now through appropriations? I know the FCC map has to be approved, but does it also have to be appropriated?
In terms of appropriation, like from Congress?
Yeah.
I believe the funds have already been appropriated through the infrastructure bill signed in. As far as I'm concerned, I think that's already been taken care of. That might be more of a congressional question if there is some sort of holdup, but I believe the funds are already there. That it's a matter of just, does Texas get 500 million or do we get 400 million? What do the maps tell us? And I think that we'll be much higher than that. I think the funds are there. It's just a matter of how much of the pot do we actually get according to what the maps tell us the need is.
Okay, and then in terms of grant applications, loan applications, do you envision this to be a public-private partnership application similar to NTIA, where these communities are needing to find a vendor, a solution that, or how does that work in terms of the two working together, private and public?
Great question. I think a lot of it depends. We're just going to have to see the notice of funding, those NOFOs. I think we're just going to have to see what the rules are, what the stipulations are. I mean, we're waiting on a lot of stuff to come out from the NTIA right now. I think to a large extent, that's probably why they're having a lot of these listening tours, is to see what people are amenable to within the broadband space. I know that public-private partnerships in a lot of ways are probably kind of the wave of the future, if you will, in broadband. Is that meaning that every single grant application is going to require it? Probably not every single one. I don't like to speak in absolutes, but I think a lot of it is we're just going to have to wait to see what the NOFOs say.
Okay, thank you. And do we have any questions from the audience? Okay. All right. Well, Sierra, thank you again. I know that
Annette, this is Melanie.
Yes.
If I may, just for the folks that might be joining us from New Mexico, just like Sierra mentioned, in New Mexico, we have a newly formed Office of Broadband Access and Expansion, which is administratively tied to the New Mexico Department of Information Technology. So we also have a Connect New Mexico Council that was just stood up, and they will be assisting and providing guidance and recommendations to the state for funding, both probably sort of in, to some degree, might be providing some guidance on the federal funding, but also for some of the state funding that was appropriated through the state legislature for broadband in New Mexico. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Well, thank you again, Sarah. I know that you've done a tremendous job in our Tri-County area. And so if anyone is interested in knowing more information about Connected Nation, if that's on the New Mexico side as well, please feel free to reach out to me and we can get you a meeting with Sierra or her counterpart. I think the work that was done in the Tri-County area is just a great showing of what it's like to get communities behind one effort and work together and try to do the best they can to bring their communities up to what most other communities have at this point. So thank you again, Sierra. We really appreciate it. Okay. All right. Well, we're moving along very swiftly, so we're ahead of schedule. And I do see that, let's see, I saw her earlier. Let's see, Tricia. Yes, you are. You are here. I wanted to move into now Economic Development Administration. And yes, I definitely should have been more timely when EDA had their ARPA funds available through tourism as well as grant adjustment, because they have been moving fast and furiously. Just quickly, on the Rio Grande Council of Government side, we are a planning district recognized by Economic Development Administration under the U.S. Department of Commerce. We are known as the West Texas Economic Development District. And so we'll hear a little bit more from Dr. Martinez in terms of the work that she and Omar did in helping us produce our comprehensive economic development strategy document. But before we do that, I would love to hear from, give Tricia the floor, because she's going to talk to us in terms of the territory that she covers, which is a good portion of New Mexico. I can't remember if you have any part of Texas, Tricia, is that correct? Do you have some?
I do. I cover the Panhandle.
Okay, so Tricia, we were going to have Mr. Pache here as well, who covers the other part, but he's not able to join us. But I would like for Tricia just to kind of give everyone an overview of where they are with their funding, just in terms of expectations and what we can do as communities to prepare ourselves for potential grant applications to EDA as we move into fiscal year 23. So Tricia, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Annette. Hi, everyone. As Annette said, my name is Tricia Corbis. I am the Economic Development Representative, or EDR, for New Mexico and the Panhandle of Texas. My counterpart, Robert, apologizes for not being able to attend, but Robert is the EDR for South and West Texas, so he covers the El Paso region as well. And so I'll just go through, this should be pretty quick. I'll go through kind of an update of the status of EDA funds. And then, as Annette mentioned, talk about how your communities can prepare for future funding. So as far as fiscal year 22 regular allocation funding goes, we're still operating under continuing resolution. So we do not have an official budget yet. And correct me if I'm wrong, Melanie, but I think that next CR extends through March 11th. So we're kind of working off of basically what we were allocated last year. And so we are continuing to accept applications for fiscal year funding. As most of you probably know, we have our Public Works program, as well as our Economic Adjustment program, our EAA program. That's our most flexible program. You could do construction, non-construction, and Public Works is primarily construction. So those are kind of what we're looking at as far as regular funding. As I mentioned, even though we don't have official budget, we are accepting applications. They're going through the process. We're just not fully processing those projects yet until we get an official budget. So the status of that fiscal year funding, again, even though we don't have it, is we are actually almost out of what we were allocated last year. So if you are interested in applying to EDA through one of those regular programs, I suggest you either contact me or contact Robert, depending on where you're located, so we can give you kind of an update of where we stand and whether it would be a good idea to submit now, or maybe to hold off until closer to fiscal year 23 funding. As far as the America Rescue Plan Act money goes, so EDA received about $3 billion with a B, billion with a B, to fund about 6 programs through America Rescue Plan Act. And the majority of those through the Austin Regional Office have been committed. So I'll just do a quick rundown. So the Good Jobs Challenge That deadline was earlier here in February, I believe February 10th. And so that program is up. We will be receiving news hopefully in the next week or two about the number of applicants, and then those that are going to be awarded that Good Jobs Challenge funding will be announced a few months from now. We also had our Indigenous Communities program through the America Rescue Plan Act. And even though there is a deadline in the Notice of Funding Opportunity of March on a lot of these programs, be aware that it's also with the disclaimer that or until the office runs out of money. And so that's why it's really important to stay in touch with your EDR, again, either Robert or me, so that we can provide guidance. So if you're working on, let's say, a tourism application right now, because that was also one of our programs through ARPA, that money has been fully committed. The Austin office only received about $16 million, and it's been fully committed. We received over $75 million in requests for that tourism program, so we are out of that money. But if you're still working on a tourism application, get a hold of me or Robert, and we can help you determine whether or not your project may be able to fit into one of our other programs, like economic adjustment assistance. We also had the statewide planning program, which was committed early on because it was basically non-competitive money. We also had America Rescue Plan Act economic adjustment assistance money. That has been fully committed as well. And then we are currently working on the Build Back Better program that was issued through this ARPA money as well. And so the 60 finalists for phase 1 have already been announced. And so if you weren't a recipient of the phase 1 money, then unfortunately you cannot apply for phase 2. And so I just wanted to mention too that for those of you that don't know, as far as Texas and New Mexico goes, we received 4 phase 1 awardees, 2 from Texas and 2 from New Mexico. And keep in mind that the total applicants was about 530 applicants. So out of all of those applicants, 60 were chosen, and 2 came from New Mexico and 2 came from Texas. And the 2 from Texas are Lamar State College in Port Arthur, and then close to you all is UTEP, obviously, as well as from New Mexico, the Central New Mexico Community College, and then the Albuquerque Hispano Chamber of Commerce. I mean, you can go to EDA's website to look at more in detail what those projects are. But those 4 entities, or coalitions that we call it, are currently working on phase 2 applications. So it's basically, best way I can sum it up is it's EDA's business as usual, just at warp speed. So they literally have 3 months to apply for 3 to 8 grants from the time they received phase 1 funding to this upcoming deadline of March 15th. They're going to be submitting between 3 to 8 different applications. And so we'll see how many of those actually receive funding. And then we also had, as I mentioned, the Travel and Tourism and Outdoor Recreation program through the America Rescue Plan Act. And as I also mentioned, those funds have been fully committed from as far as the Austin Regional Office goes. For those of you that don't know, the Austin Regional Office, we cover 5 states. We cover New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. So we've got a lot of territory to cover, and most of our funding, particularly the our regular fiscal year funding, that funding is based on population. I'm sorry. And so the Austin Regional Office is actually the penultimate funded office within EDA's 6 regional offices. It's actually the Denver Regional Office that receives the least amount of funding, even though they cover 10 states. They also cover states like Montana, North Dakota, and Wyoming, so very rural. So again, it's based on population. So my best advice is get in touch with Robert or myself, and more importantly, prior to us reaching out to us, it's our best advice that you reach out to the Council of Governments first. EDA works very closely with Annette and her team, as well as for those in Doña Ana County too, the South Central Council of Governments and J.R. Mijo, who's the executive director. We work closely with our councils of governments throughout our states to do a myriad of things. And so the COGS help provide technical assistance to communities and to folks like yourselves, as well as to upkeep and maintain the comprehensive economic development strategy, or CEDS. And we'll jump into a little bit more of that here in the next session. But you know, the way it works with the districts and the councils of governments throughout our states is that you know, we rely on folks like Annette. They're our champions. They're what I call my field generals. They really have their finger on the pulse locally. And so we rely on folks at the COG to help us find the projects for us, help us get in touch with some potential projects. Obviously, you know, meet folks like you all when we're out in the field, and then be able to give EDA updates in forums like this. So, and then if your project is or would be a potentially competitive project for EDA, at that point, the Council of Governments will get in touch with Robert or myself, and we can you know, have a meeting after that and see what the best direction would be. So with that, that's my presentation. Pending any questions, I don't have a PowerPoint for you all. I'm going to copy and paste my contact information in the chat, as well as Robert's contact information. And I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Tricia. Are there any questions from the audience for Tricia? And just as a reminder, economic development, if you want to apply for projects that will have benefit to job creation, retention, this will be the federal agency. I think they're the go-to for this initiative. And so I know that we have been assisting several of our communities in applying for the funding. And so if you need us at any point in terms of some TA, just like Tricia said, we definitely have a much better handle of it now, definitely with the ARPA funds. And so we would definitely love to assist you when we can. Any questions? Oh, Renee, I have a question for Renee Leon.
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Corbis, Renee Leon with El Paso Water. We have an EDA funded program in Northwest El Paso, and we ran into some issues with easement acquisition. So it has delayed the completion of the project. We're wondering, with the availability of funding and the increased speeds for applications, would we be at a disadvantage applying for another project while that other project is still in completion?
Not necessarily, and that's a great question. As long as the project wasn't associated with this existing project, is that right?
Correct. It
or
would
are you
be
looking
two
for
separate
supplemental
projects.
funding for it?
No, it would be two separate projects.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think that that would, I guess, you know, make your project less competitive or your application less competitive. I mean, it really is about, you know, job creation or retention and private sector investment. So if you're looking at, and I'm assuming it's a construction project, I guess I shouldn't assume, but if it is, then obviously your construction project would have to have that job creation, again, or retention, and then private sector investment. And we would evaluate it separately. You know, we've funded many projects in different cities, and they've been, you know, different fiscal years apart. And I believe that project was funded maybe about the current one, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, if I recall. 2017. Okay, yeah. And so it's been a while. In fact, I think I was the EDR at the time for the El Paso region. So So I think that's long enough time as well. I think if you applied for 2 projects in the same year, that's different. But I think if it were right now, that'd be perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
All right, do we have questions from anyone else? Okay, well, thank you, Tricia. I know that we'll be making our way to you, I'm sure, with future requests for meetings. And so thank you for that. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Annette.
Thank you. All right, folks. Well, we're going to go ahead and get to our last presenter. And so thank you, Grisela, for your patience. We are, again, a little bit ahead of schedule, so hopefully we'll give you some time back. As we had talked, as I had mentioned earlier, we do, as the West Texas Economic Development District, manage the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy document. This is a requirement as part of our planning grant with EDA, and we are charged with creating a SEDS, as they often refer to it, every 5 years. But within each of those years, we do provide updates to them. And so we're covering a regional plan for our entire 6 counties in far West Texas, but we also include information and gather data from New Mexico as well in terms of Doña Ana County, since, you know, again, we're only separated by the state lines, but the work that we do and how we interact regionally on an economic level is interchangeable. And so what we did this past year was through assistance from Dr. Martinez, as well as Omar Martinez, no relation. They provided us the assistance that we needed to be able to produce our comprehensive economic development strategy for this year. And so Omar Martinez is with Box Model Data, and Dr. Martinez is with Haciendo Strategies. And so if it's okay, Dr. Martinez, I think it'd be good if you can maybe just let them hear from your point of view in terms of how you came to this process, and just a little bit about yourself, so that way everybody has a little bit better understanding of who you are and what you do and how connected you've been to our communities for so long now.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Annette, for allowing me to be part of this presentation. I'm super excited about this workshop specifically. And before I start with a little bit of background on me, I really want to thank you and the rest of your team for being active and engaged in this community, and always looking to create ways to support communities and for them to thrive. And I hope that this is one of the many workshops that you host, and I've learned a ton, and it's really awesome to hear community members also ask those questions. So a little bit of me. I have been living in the Borderplex region for over 20 years. I came here for education purposes at UTEP. I went for my bachelor's, master's, and then I moved to New Mexico for my doctorate, and that's how I ended up in Mexico. So I am a product of the Borderplex with previous living experience in Juarez and Chihuahua. And so I am deeply passionate about working with communities, especially those underserved, because I see the need and I see the opportunity, and a lot of times the lack of connection or knowledge on how to make those projects is lacking. So I recently launched my company to do exactly that, support those communities and organizations that may be lacking that knowledge or access to resources. And so Haciendo Strategies was created for that purpose. Last year, I had the opportunity to work with Omar Martinez to co-author the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy for the West Texas Economic Development District that lies within the Rio Grande Council of Governments, as everybody has heard already. But I want to start with basic information on what the, let me see if I can, okay. So what is an economic development district? I think this is very important for us to set the context to this. These districts are, as Tricia said, these are districts that help communities connect to opportunities and they help lead a locally based, regional driven economic development planning process. And so ideally, in an ideal world, this sets is the roadmap for economic development, not in isolation, but in the comprehensive framework of a region, and all the region will be form of those counties in those districts. So for our district, we are the West Texas Economic Development District, and it is exactly the same region that the Rio Grande Council of Government serves. As Annette mentioned, we are the only one that is 2 states, and these are the counties that are part of it. Let me go back to. Okay, I am a very graphical individual, and I love this map because it gives us a sense of how diverse our district is. We have both urban and rural areas, and we also have a lot of different counties, not only that are directly bordering Mexico, but are adjacent to that. And I think that's also important for us to remember, that we are this interesting border region comprised of all different type of opportunities here. So the West Texas Economic Development District was established, as I said, to establish a roadmap. And one of the goals is to really build not only on the individual power of knowledge, but also to bring parties connect and have a collective power. This is not only for El Paso, but also for southern New Mexico with Doña Ana County. And as you heard before, this is also an important piece that the district provides, which is technical assistance to member governments. And technical assistance can look many different ways, but as simple as saying, we have an idea for a project. What do you think would make it a stronger project? We have a project that we would like to launch, and we don't know how to make the in-kind the match happen. Or we have this project, and then the district may know of other entities that have similar projects that could be merged together to make it a stronger application. So there are a lot of different ways that technical assistance can be provided. So the SETS is a 5-year planning document. We are really aiming at updating it every year to keep it as relevant and important to the grant planning process as possible. And then one really important piece to the SETS is the local input, because this is not only a project that the district completes on their own, but it's a way to engage stakeholders and to hear what the needs of communities are, what their priorities are, and then also back it up with data. I think those are really important pieces to it. And ultimately, one of the goals of the SETS and of EDA is to build capacity among those entities, and through collaboration, not only within the private sector, private-public, but also the different entities in the public sector, including the community-based organizations, as we heard. This year, as you may be aware, EDA had additional priorities, and in addition to the ones that we know about job creation and investment. And those priorities included equity and inclusion, as well as resilience and recovery. So these areas were key to including in the SETS, but also are key to providing solutions for the communities that may have been facing challenges in having underserved populations or chronically challenged communities with infrastructure and lack of access to resources. So this is a very interesting and exciting point in history, as some other people mentioned. because we are seeing opportunities for our region that I had never seen before, and they are becoming very real. So the West Texas Economic Development District SEDS, we split it into two different type of counties, because in the previous SEDS, the needs from rural and urban were very different, and we wanted to make sure that we acknowledge the different needs, but also the different resources that each of these community has. So the list that you see there, the summary background, the SWOT analysis, the strategic action plan, and the focus areas, as well as reference plans, that's the structure that the SEDS for the West Texas Economic Development District has. And I'll go into a little bit of the details of that. For the SEDS for urban counties, which is Doña Ana County and El Paso, because of the size of the populations there, these are the focus areas and key industries. And I also wanted that map because I think it's really interesting to see our region in the context of the Americas as a continent, and how we flip the discussion to then think of opportunities. And so business services, life science, advanced manufacturing, defense and aerospace, logistics, trade, tourism, and agriculture. I'm sure these are not new to you, but it's a really easy way for us to just remember the opportunities that we have, and then go into the goals and the tactics and the top strategies that we want to deploy on each one of those. For rural communities within the district, some of the opportunities are similar and some are different. And one of the top two different ones here that stand out for me is energy and mining. That is a big opportunity that we have here in the region, as well as arts and culture. And as you know, Marfa is a gem in our region. And it really shows an example of how communities in rural areas can set themselves apart from other parts of just leveraging on their assets, and really leveraging on that as an opportunity, and capturing monies from the outside coming into their communities. How can you benefit from the SEDS? As you have heard, all the funding coming to all these communities, EDA is one of the main agencies that leverages on the SEDS, but I think it also is an opportunity for you all to consider other state and federal grants, as well as philanthropical grants that may come together to help your projects come to life. Project management, project development, one of the things that we have seen in grant proposal processes is that regardless of you getting the funding, it's a very powerful process that helps you think through the development of the project, that even if you didn't get that funding specifically that you're asking for, you'll be better off than where you started. And then it can trigger a lot of opportunities for industry growth, industry partnership, and then ultimately the creation of jobs. Shovel-ready projects, that's something that we have been hearing a lot from federal agencies on what type of projects are eligible for funding. And my guess is that that will continue to be the case for the infrastructure projects or infrastructure funding. And I would encourage you to see the SEDS as a way to help you be shovel ready. And if it's not a construction project, have the program ready for implementation once you get the funding. Some very exciting outcome that we have seen from the projects that we have been involved with is that these EDA projects have actually transformed the opportunities in those communities as and being utilized as a business attraction, retention, and expansion opportunity. And then just partnerships to continue to build capacity among all of us in this region. And we are very isolated from other parts of our states, including Texas and New Mexico. And so that is an opportunity for us in this region to really look for opportunities to work together and leverage upon each other. I want to highlight the in-kind donation because I mentioned it earlier. When communities are looking for projects, one of the big pieces is how am I going to do the match component? And that is often something that it's a deterrent to communities going forward. What I see as an opportunity here is when you're working with the COG, when you're working with other partners in this community, one piece is how do you build on other projects that you're already doing or other initiatives that may be tied to this initiative that you want to put in a grant proposal, and then turn it into in-kind donations to lower the barriers for you to be competitive in a grant application process. And then just share lessons learned and how others have done it successfully, or others have done it in the past that they have learned something and they're willing to share with you all. So those are big pieces that I would highly encourage you to consider as a benefit to the SEDS and the work that you do with the West Texas Economic Development District. This is your SEDS, and so anything that you see in this list would be very helpful for these SEDS to even be more powerful and for you to continue to be able to leverage upon that document as not only for this round of federal funding, but in the future. And this is the last slide I have, and I want to highlight how much activity we have had in our region in the last year. The first three projects that you see there are projects that were that Arrowhead Center and MCA have been very active in and successful in EDA application grants. Las Cruces, City of Las Cruces received one grant in 2017, but if you see the list below that, that has been activity from the last year. And that ties to what Tricia mentioned on the amounts of monies that have been allocated. And so these are examples of how projects can be successful. And this projects listed here amounts to over $10 million of new investment in our region. And so I invite you to really consider the SEDS as an asset for you and your community, and even as a way to trigger thoughts and ideas for new initiatives building on what others have done. So this concludes my presentation. We are here to help. I have the pleasure to work in partnership with the Rio Grande COG and also with Box Model Data. And we are sincerely and excited to help you all and to have conversations on how you could trigger new projects and turn ideas into realized projects in your community. So that concludes my presentation, and I open it up for questions if there's any.
Thank you so much, Cristela. I really appreciate it. Are there any questions from the audience for Dr. Martinez or myself, or for Omar or Peggy? What I would ask for you all to consider is that as we start to initiate our process for making updates to our SEDS, we would love to hear from you. And I see Marcy, you're unmuted. So what would you like to say?
It was along those lines, Annette. I was just wondering if there is a general time frame that this will be updated each year. Like, when should we, prepare, review and get any comments or additions or whatever to Dr. Martinez? Is there a time frame or sort of a rolling basis?
Yes. So what I'll do is I'll work with both Griselda and Omar, just so we can establish a timeline to make sure that we are that they're available. What they're going to be doing for us this go around, which I think is just such a gracious effort, is they're going to be providing in-kind services to us, and so we definitely will get with them so we can establish that timeline. I'm not sure yet when, so I don't want to give you a date, but we'll be rolling that out. I think just based on what we've heard today from so many of our presenters, we're going to need a lot of collaboration. I think in order to help each other, there might be a leader out of the pack in terms of looking at what funding sources are going to be most appropriate for others to apply for. So definitely we'll get that in line for you, and we'll figure out a date that's going to be going forward.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions? So Griselda did put in the chat information for her email as well as Omar's, and you all have mine. So I think that what we'll do is, we're ahead of schedule again. My team will go ahead and look at the bill.gov, look at the Excel sheet, and we're definitely going to be drilling down the information. I think we definitely need to have a really big lens on rural communities. I'm hoping that that there's going to be a lot more discretionary than the formula-based funding for you all to apply for that's going to be beneficial to you. I think that might be in certain circumstances a better shot. So and then we'll be looking at perhaps having additional meetings so we can talk about these specific funding sources. Robert Pichet from EDA Austin Regional Office has offered to assist in gathering some of these federal agencies to be able to give their webinars on these items. And so that will be something that will be forthcoming. But at the same time, if you all are signed up with either Congressman Gonzalez's office, Congresswoman Escobar's office, or Senator Lujan's office, make sure that you are signed up for any of their newsletters, because they've been sending out tons of information on these funding sources. So that's another way for you all to be able to have access to that. And if you're not sure where to start, feel free to call me or anyone else within the staff, and we can go ahead and help you with that process as well. So with that being said, I see some people are signing off, and so I'll let you all again finish off your day. So thank you for participating. We will have this recorded and it'll be on our YouTube channel. So we will be sending out the hyperlink and hopefully have it ready by tomorrow morning. So thank you, everybody, and I hope you have a good day.